And so the downfall of Alien begins. It's Alien 3. Making his feature film directorial debut in 1992, David Fincher hated working on this sequel so much that he has since disowned it, claiming an incredible amount of studio interference made it near impossible for him to direct this film. 20th Century Fox at that time needed a win and told him they needed Alien 3 by a certain date, and it became apparent to him they were not concerned with quality as long as it made money. Releasing to negative reviews from critics and pissing off fans, Alien 3 was worlds away from what we all wanted. But years later, a special edition was released, which was based on Fincher's original cut of the movie, which Fox dismissed and reshot. This is known as the assembly cut, which is not something that Fincher was directly involved in making, but it was based on his original version of the film. This version is 30 minutes longer and is often regarded as the better version of the film. So Alien 3 was basically the Justice League of the 90s, set on a backwater Weyland-Yutani prison world, because of course Weyland-Yutani have those. The story picks up where Aliens left off, with Ripley, Hicks, Newt and what is left of Bishop in stasis on their way back home. But all does not go to plan. A fire breaks out and they crash land on this planet with the only survivor being Ripley, once again being played by Sigourney Weaver. Michael Biehn, who played Hicks in Aliens, was unhappy about not coming back and the way his character was killed off, that being unceremoniously killed off screen at the start of the movie. Which was a shame because he was good in Aliens and it would have been nice to have him back for one last movie. Newt was also killed off screen, which Carrie Henn didn't really mind, and to be fair, by the time Alien 3 was made, she would have been too old to play the part anyway. So we have Ripley crash landing on a prison world, with only Charles Dance and some prisoners to call a friend. To be fair, I do like Charles Dance in this, and he doesn't even play one of the prisoners, yet he is more intimidating than any of them. Okay, yes, he was a prisoner, but he served his time and was released, but carried on working at the prison as their doctor. And the scene where he tells Ripley his life story, the tragedy that he went through and why he went to prison, was really good. I won't spoil it, because if you haven't watched Alien 3 before and you do decide to watch it, I don't want to ruin one of the few genuinely good character scenes in this film. Sadly though, he is not in the whole film, as he gets killed to death by the alien. Poor Charles Dance. Still though, beats getting shot on a toilet. So while the previous film was a purebred action film, this one goes back to its roots somewhat. I say somewhat because it tries to do what the original Alien film did. It's just Alien 3 isn't as good at it. A singular xenomorph with a group of unarmed people slowly being picked off one by one. Yeah, it's a maximum security prison with no weapons and no way off the planet. Doesn't sound very secure, does it? What if the prisoners rise up and take over the supply ship during one of its scheduled drop-offs? But whatever. The main problem here is it's not as effective as Alien at doing suspense horror. I mean, don't get me wrong, there are definitely some good scenes. A few brutal kills, some really good shots of the alien just covered in blood, and I love the fan kill, by the way. Could say... no, the joke's too easy. But the best scene is the one in the infirmary with Ripley and the alien face to face. It is just a really nice shot, which Fincher wasn't allowed to shoot. He was, for some reason, denied permission by the film's producers to do this, but he decided to just grab a camera and he and Weaver shot the scene. It made it into the final cut of the film, the trailer, and well, it speaks for itself. It's a cool looking scene within a very dry and bland looking movie filled with bad effects. And speaking of bad effects, the alien? Visually speaking, I am very divided on. There are shots where they use a prop alien, usually the close-up scenes, and they genuinely look great. But then there's the CGI shots, which there's actually not many of them. There are only a few, such as when the alien blows up at the end, and the birth scene in the assembly cut. The rest of the time, they actually use a puppet alien, which was expertly controlled and rather impressively implemented into the film. And while I do respect the hard work that went into the puppet alien, and the making of videos, by the way, are rather interesting, I would recommend checking them out. And while I am impressed by the work that went into them and how they did it, the effects themselves don't really hold up all that well. And if I am honest, it just looks like early days janky CGI. It's impressive, brilliant, and utterly unfortunate that they put all of this work into creating practical effects, and the end result is it looks like 90s janky CGI. So yeah, I am divided on it. A mix of it's impressive how they did it, and then on the other hand, yeah, but it doesn't look good. Another heavily criticised aspect of the movie, and this applies to both versions, is the overly nihilistic tone. I mean, the previous films weren't exactly puppies and skittles, but this one? There's just no joy to be had with this at all. It certainly didn't help that the majority of characters in this are convicts who are murderers, rapists, and all sorts of depraved, psychotic individuals. There's even a scene where some of them try and rape Ripley. No. Just no. And then there's the people that work at the prison. The warden is an arsehole. His second is a yes man, and, well, okay, Charles Dance was pretty cool. But that's only because it's Charles Dance. He gets a pass. Although I will say this, one inmate did stand out from the rest. Played by Charles S. Dutton, he was certainly a more enjoyable character. Which is weird, given that this is how he introduced himself to Ripley.
Yeah, well, you don't want to know me, lady. I'm a murderer and rapist of women.
But he only really said that because he was afraid of temptation. He has struggled for years to better himself, but it's easy to do that when there's nothing to tempt you. So seeing a woman for the first time in years scared him, but he powered on through, even saving Ripley from the men that attempted to rape her, and ultimately ended up sacrificing himself at the end of the movie. Given that he had such a grim introductory line, it's impressive how they almost redeemed him. I suppose it would have been different if we saw his past, or heard about it in more detail, rather than just what he said to introduce himself.
Fuck you.
So, there's this one character called Walter Gorlick, played by Paul McGann, and I can't decide whether I like his character or not. He seems to be a weird inclusion to the movie that doesn't really go anywhere, but he is amusing. He is an inmate and witnesses another inmate getting killed by the alien quite early on. He is then locked in the infirmary, where he sees Charles Dance's character being killed off. Walter becomes obsessed with the alien and says it is a higher being and starts to worship it. Now in the theatrical cut, this is the last we see of him, but originally and later re-added to the assembly cut, he gets out of the infirmary. And when they have the alien locked away as part of a cunning plan hatched by Ripley and the other inmates, Walter comes along and lets the alien out, who proceeds to kill him dead. His performance was fun, but none of that really added much to the movie, which is why it was cut from the theatrical version. Perhaps, though, it was worth re-adding it in just for the goofiness of it. Probably the closest we'll see to anything even remotely resembling joy in this story. So the movie's finale sees them killing the alien by covering it in hot lead, then exploding it with water. Because science. At least they didn't just chuck it out of an airlock again. I suppose that was getting a bit old hat after 2 movies. Then Ripley comes face to face with Bishop. The real Bishop. The human that the android bishops were based on. They have come to save Ripley. Well, not Ripley. Not really. Because you see, Ripley has a bun in the oven. She got face-huggered between movies, which is what started the electrical fire and caused the crash to begin with. So she has spent the entire movie with an alien, well, actually no, not just any alien, but an alien queen inside of her. And Weyland-Yutani wants it, but Ripley said no, and jumps to her death, taking the alien with her. For the theatrical release, it was reshot to have the alien burst out of her while she was falling, to make it seem more dramatic, but it was restored to the original version for the assembly cut, where it did not burst out of her. I suppose the assembly cut makes more sense given the direction that Resurrection goes in, but we'll get to that soon. Alien 3 is a bleak mess, leaving little to be enjoyed. True enough, the assembly cut is superior, but ultimately it is the best of two bad options. Overall, I will give Alien 3 theatrical a 4 out of 10, while the assembly cut rises to a 5 out of 10. I also have no real preference on Rottweiler versus Ox being the host for the alien, but the story of them trying to put a prop facehugger on an unruly ox was quite funny. To be fair to the ox, I'd have protested about being in Alien 3 as well. You have been watching Good or Bad, and if you've enjoyed today's video, please go ahead and hit those like and subscribe buttons, and I will see you next time.